Here's every character that inspired Marvin from SML, from his appearance to his personality and the role he plays in the show. The most obvious one is Mario. Before Marvin was Marvin, he was literally Mario. A Mario plush was used to portray the character. But what makes Marvin interesting is that SML's Mario was never really written like Nintendo Mario. Nintendo Mario is brave, heroic, adventurous, and simple. SML's Mario slowly became the opposite. Instead of saving princesses, he was paying bills. Instead of fighting Bowser, he was arguing with Jeffy. Instead of going on adventures, he was sitting on the couch trying to survive whatever disaster happened in his house that day. So Mario inspired Marvin's original look and identity, but the personality became something else entirely. Marvin is what happens when you take a heroic video game mascot and trap him inside a miserable sitcom family. The next major comparison is Homer Simpson. Homer is one of the most important cartoon dads ever, and you can definitely see part of that DNA in Marvin. Both are flawed fathers who are always responsible, not always kind, and not always morally right, but they are still the central dad figure of the family. Marvin, like Homer, is often selfish, impatient, angry, lazy, or desperate. He can be a bad husband, a bad father, and sometimes a bad person, but the show still uses him as the emotional center of the house. He is the character everything comes back to. The difference is that Homer usually causes a lot of his own problems. Marvin feels more like someone who already woke up inside a problem. Jeffy is causing chaos, Goodman wants money, Rose is defending Jeffy, Brooklyn Guy is making things worse, and Marvin is just trying not to explode. That is what makes him feel like a darker, more stressed version of the classic animated dad. Homer is irresponsible because he's impulsive. Marvin is irresponsible because he's exhausted. Another huge influence on Marvin's personality is his Squidward tentacles. This might be one of the best comparisons, because Marvin and Squidward are both characters who mainly want peace, and their entire life is being surrounded by people who ruin that peace. Squidward just wants to play clarinet, paint, relax, and live a calm life, but SpongeBob and Patrick constantly invade his space, annoy him, destroy his plans, and drag him into chaos. Marvin works in a very similar way. He does not want some grand adventure, he just wants his house to be quiet, his bills to be paid, and Jeffy to stop making everything worse. That is why Marvin often feels less like a traditional father and more like a character trapped next to the most annoying people alive. Jeffy, in many ways, is Marvin's SpongeBob and Patrick combined. He is loud, childish, unpredictable, destructive, and impossible to fully control. And Marvin's comedy often comes from the same place as Squidward's, watching a tired, bitter character slowly lose his sanity because nobody around him respects his peace. The difference is that Squidward is usually just a neighbor or co-worker. Marvin is legally and emotionally tied to the chaos. He cannot just move away from Jeffy the way Squidward wishes he could move away from SpongeBob. Marvin is stuck in the house with the person who ruins his life the most. That makes his Squidward energy even more miserable. Then there is Hank Hill. Hank is not chaotic like Homer, and he is not as openly bitter as Squidward. He is the serious dad who wants a structure, discipline, common sense, and a normal life. That side of Marvin comes out whenever he tries to be the reasonable adult in the room. Marvin wants rules. He wants Jeffy to behave. He wants Rose to stop enabling him. He wants Goodman to stop threatening him. He wants the house to function like a normal house. Like Hank, Marvin often reacts to absurd situations with frustration because he knows things should not be this stupid. But Marvin is not as stable as Hank. Hank actually has principles, he believes in work, responsibility, family, and order. Marvin wants those things, but he's usually too weak, broke, scared, lazy, or overwhelmed to enforce them. He wants to be the respected father, but the SML universe does not respect him enough to let that happen. So Marvin has some of Hank's straight man energy, but without Hank's dignity. He wants order, but he lives in a world designed to humiliate him. Then there is Peter Griffin. Peter is not a perfect comparison, because Marvin is not usually the main source of chaos the way Peter is, but Peter clearly connects to the kind of adult comedy that Marvin became: selfish, morally inconsistent, immature, angry, and capable of doing terrible things, while the show still treats him as the main family man. Marvin is usually more stressed and less confident than Peter, but they share that adult cartoon logic where the dad can do something horrible in one episode and still return to normal by the next one. That is important to Marvin. He can sell Jeffy, hide a body, lie, act selfish, or completely fail as a parent, but the show still resets him back into the role of the normal dad afterward. That is very adult animation sitcom logic, and Peter Griffin is one of the clearest examples of that archetype. And finally, there is Shrek, the original Shrek from the Shrek movies. This is more about the original Shrek's personality than the SML version of Shrek, because Marvin actually has a lot in common with the idea of Shrek as a character: an angry, tired guy who wants to be left alone, but keeps getting dragged into problems he never asked for. Shrek's whole thing is that he wants peace, he wants his swamp, he wants privacy. He acts rude and angry, but a lot of that anger comes from being constantly bothered, judged, or forced into situations he does not want to deal with. That is very Marvin. Marvin wants his version of the swamp: his couch, his house, his TV, his routine, his quiet day. But Jeffy, Rose, Goodman, Brooklyn Guy Jr., and everyone else keep invading that space. So Marvin becomes bitter, defensive, and annoyed because the only thing he wants most is the one thing SML never gives him: peace. That is why Marvin's personality sometimes resembles Shrek more than the actual Shrek from SML. SML Shrek is mostly his own exaggerated joke that likes cheesecake, but Marvin carries more of that original Shrek emotional structure: a grumpy man who acts mean because his life never gives him room to breathe. So Marvin is not inspired by just one character. Mario gave him the original body, name, and design. Homer Simpson gave him the flawed animated dad energy. Squidward gave him the bitter, peace-loving victim of annoying people. Hank Hill gave him the stressed straight man father who wants order. Peter Griffin gave him the morally messy adult comedy dad structure. And Shrek gave him the grumpy, exhausted personality of someone who just wants to be left alone. That combination is why Marvin works. He is a comedy dad built out of frustration, failure, anger, exhaustion, and survival. He's the dad who wants order in a show that only creates chaos. He's the normal guy in a universe where nobody is normal. And that is what makes Marvin one of the most important characters in SML. Follow me, you want to watch more funny videos like this one.